Hey guys, welcome to a new series. We are going to be doing Dominion's interventions, and in this, basically, people are going to send me turn files, and I will give you all of my thoughts. Every last little bit of thought I can muster after thoroughly reviewing the turn, the game, the diplomacy. I'll just give you my thoughts, and I've done this kind of for a few people just for fun, and then I thought it would be kind of fun to put this on YouTube. The way it's going to work now, or the way it currently works, is if you're the top level Patreon subscriber, you get like one of these a month, and you could be the top level for just like a month, and then like stop supporting it all on Patreon or go back to like normal. But basically, I think it's like $40, and it takes me probably about like 3 hours to put one of these together in terms of going through all the Diplo and all that. So basically, it's minimum wage. But anyway, I hope it's fun, really, for you guys who are watching, and that you've seen me kind of talk about guides and talk about my games, but this will be interesting in that this is me coming into a game at like, without any kind of influence in the game leading up to there, and just giving you a full blast of all of my thoughts and how everything fits together. And in some ways, I think that's a better way to see at least how I think about the game. And hopefully it gives you some insight into what to do. Now, my other goal in doing this is for the player that submits it to me, hopefully they end up having a much more successful set of turns that come after kind of when they submitted it to me compared to before. Now, one of the issues is, since this is going to be going up online, is that when you submit it to me, I need time to wait before I upload it so that I don't ruin any advantage you got and basically my advice by the other people being able to see, all your sites, your income, what units you have, your strategy, your research, all that stuff. So it'll probably be like 1 to 2 months, and I'll talk. You get to decide, basically. But I think 2 months is probably about the right amount of time to wait, so that things like what sites you have and stuff like that don't come out. In 2 months, your research isn't that important, but sites can be kind of a big deal. So we're going to start by talking about his pretender. I actually am re-recording this. I had already gone through and talked about it, but I felt kind of bad because it was like an hour and a half, and I think I was a bit too aggressive in just being like, this you should do and this you should do, and like the first thing I went off on was this pretender. And a lot of people are like, oh, the utter vast, it's so awesome, you can move anywhere on the map. And I'm like, this is one of the worst pretender chassis. And I'll talk a little bit about why I think that is, without getting too critical on it. And I'm not going to really talk too much about the build, because especially since there's nothing the player can do about it, but I did want to bring it up, and I do want to talk a little bit about design. So it does have very good scales. It took Cold 3, which isn't a big deal if you're underwater. It's middle-aged Rlyeh, too, if I hadn't said that before. But he's got Growth 3, which is nice. You really do want magic with Rlyeh, so this is a bit of a hit there. But you probably could do a chassis like this with, not Utter Vast, but picking something else, and make up for some of these weaknesses. Maybe go Magic 3 and cancel out your Misfortune. This is such an expensive chassis. So there's a few things. Okay, well, we're just going to talk real quick about the name of the pretender here is Mead Maker, just because that's the guy who submitted it. But there's a few things we're going to talk about. One is basically this is a raiding chassis because it can jump anywhere. Unfortunately, unless you get a really good cross path, it's not really strong enough because you can't put any items at all on it to function as a light super combatant. If you get high death, you can skelly spam your way through small armies, but big armies will tend to kill you, or specific counters will tend to kill you. You can teleport around the map, so that's nice, and you blink in combat, which is nice. The problem with that, though, is it's still a normal phase movement, so you get attacked in normal phase. You have a few things that are nice. You have built-in ethereal damage reversal and innate spellcaster. Innate spellcaster is super good. But I think all of these basically give you one of the best light rating chassis in the game. But how much are you willing to pay for a light rating chassis? And I could go into like way more about it, but that's one of the reasons I'm re-recording, because I don't really want to do that, because there's not much we can do to change it. Let me just say there are better options for light rating chassis than spending this many design points. That's kind of my full thought. The other thing is spending 1 on Earth. This is like an 80 design point. You can empower in this. And you have Earth mages, so you can go site search Earth. And then, by the time this guy comes out, he's imprisoned. If you've gotten like Earth 2 income, there's a good chance you can empower. So empowering better than 80 design points. That right there buys you 2 scales. But you're right, you do need other paths. But if you're only going to get 1, like Earth 1, probably better to empower. If you need to get high death, you're not going to be able to empower high death. You can empower Death 1, but you're not going to skelly spam with Death 1. So, anyway, just things to think about. If you want to go with this kind of like meta, where you have a big tough guy come awake, you totally could do like an Imprisoned Titan. Which I think would serve the same role, but it would be stronger. I think the one that I was talking about, I think having magic phase attacks is pretty important. So air in this case is pretty clutch. You could go astral. The air guy is a little better because I think you get better paths than this with just astral and water, which doesn't really add to your diversity. This lets you pick up like recuperation on the cheap, and then you can either get shock resistance or like cold resistance if you want to be casting Grip of Winter or something. But anyway, this guy with gear will probably be significantly better than the Uttervast without gear. And it's also going to give you really nice path access that the Uttervast is not going to give you. So this would be like a much better choice for a Pretender God. But I'm not going to go into the details of talking about it. So anyway, we're going to get actually into the game, which is the point of doing this. I just want to give a little feedback first on the Pretender. And then we're going to jump into the game. So here we go, Mead Maker. Okay, so this is the turn. And for those of you who don't know, this is General Confusion's game. So you will get another perspective on General Confusion. On General Confusion's game, and it's not going to be the perspective of the Rlyeh player, because I am not the Rlyeh player, but it will be my perspective of this guy's position. And he will hear it, and he'll be able to act on it. At the time he sent it to me, it was turn 27. So, yeah, let's go through some of the big strokes first. He's done a pretty amazing job expanding. He's definitely a mid to large size player. His empire goes all the way up here. You can't really look at the Dominion. Down here, and he's got a huge part of the lake. And he's got a small little foothold on land where he's been pushing Airmore back. He has pretty good diplomatic relations. He has a very weird non-aggression pact with Yis, where he cannot go to war with them until like turn 50, which is 25 turns away. So it's like permanent. If anybody breaks it, it's considered like a vile breach, which is not a situation I'm very familiar with. Especially like with the neighbor where you may want to hotly contest something like the lake, and you're not even sure like who's going to get to eat Atlantis, for example. And I'm not actually sure. This is Atlantis, so it looks like Yis is going to get Atlantis. He has a good relationship with Fascia, who's right here. They have a little bit of the water, but also a lot of this coast. And then I don't know his relationship with all the elves up here, but I assume it's pretty good. The elves potentially could do some light raiding underwater. So that's the first thing. He has, I think I counted it before, it's like almost 40 provinces, which is pretty damn good for turn 27. His income isn't great, even though he went good scales, because his dominion is not in his provinces. So that's kind of the first thing that jumps out at you, is you went with like a scales build, where you have really good scales, but you only have it in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. What, 9? I don't know if I double counted that, like 9. And you have like almost 40 provinces, so you have it in a fourth of your provinces. So you spent a ton of design points on getting scales, but you're not really getting any of the advantage of it. And this actually brings me to a pretty good point about underwater nations, which is it's actually really difficult to control dominion for underwater nations. Now, the reason is because, look at this, like almost every water province is surrounded by 4, like many more land provinces. Like this one is surrounded by 4 land while it only has 2 water neighbors. This one is surrounded by 4 land but 2 water neighbors. Like this one, okay, this one has 4 water neighbors and only 2 land, so it's 3 land, so it's a little bit of an exception. But like this one is surrounded by 5 land and has 2 water neighbors. So there's a mechanic in Dominions where when basically candles are passing from one province to another, if it's going to go over land, it has to like pass an additional check, and if it fails that check, then it will basically randomly send it to a different province again, which will probably be a water province. And so that basically goes on until it lands on wherever the candle does. But that is a mechanic to help keep Dominion from spreading between land and water. But what I will say is it's super dependent on what map you're playing and how the maps are set up. But by the way most maps and Dominions are set up, there are many more coastal provinces than there are underwater neighbors. And so long as that is the case, it is very difficult to keep your Dominion in the water, especially if there's a lot of temples built on your border. Because even with that mechanic, there can be a tremendous amount of Dominion pressure being put into the water. If you get scales, like gulling scales, I think is nice. But if you do it, you have to like very intentionally plan to get your Dominion. And he took high Dominion. I didn't show you. He had Dominion strength 7, which is high. But it's good it's high because you need it kind of high to keep it out here. So, okay, you go high Dominion. You need to keep your Dominion strength out here. One of the things you've got to be doing is, putting temples up and like making sure you claim thrones. Like this throne's going to give you 2 Dominion push, which is going to be pretty important. The other thing you can do is when you have like 1 or 2 candles, you get really nice cheap preachers right here who are only 45 gold, and they're slaves, so they have like almost no upkeep. I don't know if it stacks with sacred, but they cost 9 a year. It's like nothing. It's compared to these guys who are 68 a year, and these guys are almost upkeep free. So you put these in some of your light provinces, and they will make sure your Dominion never goes down below 1 or 2. The problem is they're only going to be able to preach it up to like, 2? Right, which is not very high. And the way Dominion works is if your Dominion candles are kind of low, if they're in like the 1 to 2 range, it's really easy for enemy Dominion to push back in. So these guys, while they're pretty good for just like maintaining border provinces, they're not going to do a great job at like firmly planting your Dominion in the ocean. If you want to do that, you really are going to have to use your preachers right here who are holy 2. And these guys, when they're in a temple, they can preach it all the way up to Dominion strength 5. And that's going to form a firm basis for your Dominion to spread outside of your forts. But I don't think it's really worth putting these guys outside in other provinces. So one of the things you need to do, like to get bigger, to get more income, you don't really need to conquer anybody right now. All you really need to do is focus on getting your Dominion up. Getting your Dominion up will easily get you to 3k income. Right? So once all the provinces are in your Dominion, you will hit 3k. Like almost for certain. Okay. So that's one thing. And that's getting up to 3k is really nice. Like you have a really big nation, it's going to help a lot. Getting growth in there too is really nice too, because you're going to get the scaling population bonus over time. So yeah, you want to go ahead and do that. Now, I say that like, oh, you need to do this, man. But, he's probably been making trade-offs where he's been making troops, and those troops have allowed him to decisively win against Atlantis, and then also to fight Airmore, who might have pushed into the ocean or built forts here, and they didn't because he spent money on troops instead of temples. So that's okay. And he's building a fort here, but so that's kind of the first thing, is get temples in your forts. He's got one here, and I think he had told me he was planning on doing this. So he's got another guy here. This guy can potentially build a temple this turn, but get these forts templed, and then in the forts you have templed, you want, like this guy can be researching, you can be getting 9 research points, or he can be preaching you up to 5. Now, why would you want to go up to 5? Well, the more, and like this isn't a great example because there's so much Dominion pressure here, it's going to be so hard to keep your Dominion on the rest of the ocean provinces, but I think, and like your next Defacius cap even, going to be really hard to keep your Dominion in this area. But let's talk about it in general, like once you have your fort up here. Getting it to 5, the way Dominion works is the higher your Dominion gets, the more likely it is to, instead of go, like when a temple creates a little Dominion candle, instead of it going to the province it started in, the higher your Dominion is, the more likely it is to go elsewhere. And if you're in the ocean, it means the more likely that temple is going to push Dominion out here. So effectively what you're doing is, as long as the Dominion in your fort is less than like whatever the max level this guy can preach to, you're going to you're basically going to have another free temple here where this guy is preaching. It kind of works out like that. So you're getting like another temple for however much this guy cost, which is not 400 gold. It's 200, right? So that's the value of having him preach over what he would have been doing otherwise. So that's kind of one thing. And doing that, you'll get your Dominion up. The other thing is, it's even better than that, because when you have low Dominion candles, when there's a conflict between candles, the higher your Dominion is, the more likely you're going to win the conflict, and so the less likely you are to lose a candle. So sitting around in low Dominion is a really good way to like waste all of your little temple checks that get produced. So get these guys preaching, get it up to 5 at least, where you're much safer in terms of like winning or losing the temple check war. Okay. And it will help spread Dominion to all your little neighboring provinces. But, like this province, it's enemy for Dominion. Sending a Holy 1 preacher in here is not going to erode it at all. You may actually have to get a Holy 2 and push it in here to get that Dominion down. But that may piss Fascia off. Okay, so I think we've talked a little bit ad nauseum about Dominion, but it's super important, and understanding how it works underwater is also really important. And it's one of the things that, like, when I first played underwater, it was really hard to figure out and to understand. And I just remember being really frustrated because I went scales and I wasn't getting any of the benefits of it. And I see, like, the exact same thing happening here. So it is something to think about, because you are going to have much larger, basically, capital investment, where you're having to put a lot of money in at the beginning to kind of get your economy going. So you're like you can think of it, you're like a very slow rolling ball. It takes a lot more you have a lot more momentum, and it takes a lot longer to get that momentum going if you go scales underwater. Okay, so that is Dominion talk to death. Now let's talk a little bit about Diplo. So you have a lot of safety. You have safety here. This war is kind of over. The thing that this player said they're worried about, Meadmaker, is they're worried about Airmore. Because Airmore is big. Airmore stretches all the way from over here. They've conquered part of Asphodel, though I think Kalim's probably going to be the one finishing off Asphodel. And they stretch over here. They've conquered part of Ashdod, and they stretch all the way over here into Shinuyama. So they're kind of spaghettiing their way through. But I don't know how thick or thin the noodle is. And neither does this player. So one of the things he's wondering is, how do I fight Airmore? Like, how do I win? I want to take forts. I want to knock him back. Airmore's cap is right here. So it is definitely in striking range where you could potentially knock them out of the game. They have a pretty good bless. I'd have to look at what it was. I think it's quickness. Okay, we're going to look. I'm going to pause it. Okay, so I went and looked at it. It's magic weapons, quickness, magic resistance, and undying 10. So that's okay. It's not extremely, mind-blowingly scary, but, it's pretty good. The MR is going to be really good against what I'm going to suggest we do for killing them. First, let's look at, this turn. Let's look at how do your battles went. Okay, so we're pinging Airmore here. Or no, Airmore is pinging you. They have an Earth Gnome, and you're going to kill them. You've got a battle here where you have a bunch of Meteorite Guard in a blob, and then a bunch of Illithids in a blob, versus Airmore, who's got these guys. So we can see the Mind Blast targeted the ghouls, and that's because they're the only, I think aside from the Censor, non-mindless unit. These guys are in a sparse line, so that Banishment's not going to be terribly effective. And then this main force is going to come in with the skeletons. Now what is odd is that now the Mind Blast is targeting some of these, which it shouldn't do because these are mindless. So that may be a bug. I don't know. May need to get reported. Okay, and because they're in a sparse line, they're actually probably going to wrap around these Meteorite Guard. And these knights are on attack rear, so they're going to just run right behind. Okay, now the infantry did condense inwards. But these knights are going to do a fair amount of damage. Now while these guys are flanking, notice that most of your Meteorite Guard aren't doing anything. They're just sitting right here. Okay. And these knights are just working their way. So the fact that you got flanked is really causing you to lose this. So there's a lot we can learn from this, alright? But let's just see what happens here. Okay, the knights kind of... Okay, and then the army routes, and then you guys die. So, this is not very hopeful. You've lost a lot of expensive troops. These guys are $50 a pop. So, if you lost 15, and then how many retreated? 12 made it back. And then 17 made it back. How many... Wait, how many... Okay, so you lost an additional 6, probably half of them. Right? So anyway, just between these 16, so it's like 800 gold, and these guys, and then this is 13 gold. So, I don't know. Yeah, over 1,000 gold stuff you lost to like a not very scary Airmorian army. So that doesn't bode well. Let's take a look at this other one. Okay, this is just PD. And then you're attacking Asphodel here inside his fort. And you've got a sparse line, I guess, to dodge archer fire. And these guys are just trickling through in waves, so that's kind of nice for you. Some of your guys will get put to sleep, but these guys I do not think are mindless. Oh no, they are, but they're still getting targeted, but nothing's happening. Which you would think... So that is kind of weird. It looks like that is a bug. Mind Blast is only supposed to target targets with mines. It definitely doesn't do damage to people without mines. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about Illithids. I've played Rlyeh a couple times. I think I've won once and lost once, and I think I learned a lot more from the game I lost than the game I won. Yeah, so let's talk about them. So these guys basically are good in critical mass when you can just kill enough of the guys. Now, one of the things you need to figure out, I kind of am interested, so if you tell me, that would be awesome. These guys should only target targets with mines. I think part of it might be fire and attack closest, like just put none and see if that helps. I don't know how that's working, but this is, like, you do not want these guys targeting dudes without mines. They do nothing. It's like you don't, like, the main investment of your army isn't there. I don't know if this will fix it, but it's a big deal. And if it is targeting things without mines, like if it's targeting the skeleton chaff, I wouldn't recruit, like, any more of them. So, but these guys are good in critical mass, especially versus Airmore, where you can kill all of the units with mines, and usually that will leave the army leaderless, and then they'll all disintegrate. So that is kind of how to use it. So you don't really want to split up like you had. This was where you lost a bunch of them. Like, they should be combined. Like, you just want one stack with like 200. Now you have to worry a little bit about supply issues, so you might want to forge, which you're going to need kind of anyway. Some cauldrons of enormous broth, or a bag of wine, which you have to get a little higher in construction. But potentially someone else can forge it for you. But you want to roll these guys around as a doom stack. And the other thing is, you want to have a nice, big, healthy line protecting them. You do not want them getting flanked like this. So having the Meteorite Guards is great, but honestly, you would have been way better with like a little fewer Illithids and enough Lobo Guard to form as like a legitimate wall. And the Meteorite Guard, here's the thing. They're hard to amass, because like if we look in your capital, you can only get like 10 of them a turn, which is pretty good, and that's because you went perfect scales almost. Now... Okay, so you can get this many a turn. If you're going to spend the time to get Meteorite Guard, which, awesome, you're doing, you need to have them on a Slave Prince, because this is your guy with the most morale. 80 leadership, right? And they need to be in a line formation. Doing some kind of business where they're not in a line formation, it's a no-go. It's a non-starter, right? These guys need to be in a line formation, right? And you can put Lobo Guard behind them to fill in the gaps, and that will do so much better than the Blob, right? Because you have to think about it. One of the things with Rlyeh is your troops are not really there to do damage. I mean, Meteorite Guard are solid troops. They have a little bit of a weakness in the morale department, but they're solid frontline. But really, you're not there for the Meteorite Guard. The things who are going to be doing damage are the things in your backline, which can be your Illithids if you're fighting most nations. But what it's really going to be, and the real strength of your nation, is in communions. And this is a communion nation. So let's talk first about the communion slave, the kind of default communion slave for Rlyeh. It's this guy, the Star Child. So 85 gold, and he's stealthy and an assassin, has good base HP 14, which is important in communions because a lot of times you end up taking HP damage, and plant resistance, which is just a little nice. So very, very solid unit. One of the better units in the game, I think. 85 gold, very, very cheap. Compare that to this guy, who's more than twice as much, and he is lower upkeep because he's a slave, so that's nice. Has big morale issues. He does have more pass, so, and he's got some cool cross pass he can get with Earth and nature, but not quite as good. And being a communion slave, you're basically paying top dollar. If the other thing about he has less HP too, which is important if you're a communion slave. So while he does have lower upkeep by a little bit, 70 versus I think this guy's like 68. Or no, it's more upkeep. Okay, so yeah, you don't want to use these guys as communion slaves, all right? You want to use these. And right now you don't have any at all, like not in any of your forts. So like you have one of the best mages in the game, and you don't have any. Now, part of it is because you didn't go magic for your scales, and I think you really want to do that because of mind hunt and stuff like that. But you didn't because of your Utterbass. So this is kind of like some things that are stacking up to like make you make decisions. If you don't go magic, then these guys do get significantly more research than, like this guy gets 7 versus this guy who gets 13. So, and you can make either one of them in a turn. So like you're going to get twice as much per fort turn out of getting this guy for research. So that's kind of one of the reasons you want to do it. If you go magic scales, this 7 jumps all the way up to 10, which is really big. Compared to this, where 13 jumps up to 16, which is not as big. So these guys are much more economical, kind of, if you go magic scales. Another reason to go magic scales is you get to get one of the better mages in the game. I mean, slave mages are good, don't get me wrong, you definitely want some of them. But the Star Child is going to be the basis of our communions. And versus Airmore, it is extremely important we have communions. If we look at your research, we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna come back and talk more. But you already have the most important communion research, which is Thaumaturgy 1. The other important communion research you need is we need personal regeneration at Enchantment 2. So that would be like a very quick pit stop to get immediately. And this lets your nature randoms of your slave mages jump in the communion and do personal regeneration. And then they can also do things like liquid body or something else just to make your slaves a little tougher. But a lot of times you'll want to give these guys who potentially could cast off-path things, like a bow, and then they'll shoot the bow instead of casting off-path things to fatigue the communion out. So that's good. The other important things we have Power of the Spheres, which is really good. We have Light of the Northern Star. Both these are really, really good for the communion. And we also have Summon Earth Power, which is really good for the communion. You can also get that through your Earth random slaves, and they can cast it, and that will go basically when any master casts a spell as part of a communion, as long as the target is self, it will also apply that same buff to all the communion slaves. So Earth Power fits that bill, Power of the Spheres fits that bill, and that will give you a very efficient communion for things like, especially for casting astral stuff. Here for evocation, you've got solar rays, and that's really good. It's nice to have solar rays in your pocket. Starfires is okay. Your guys can cast this sometimes, but the real thing, the real powerhouse of Rlyeh and communions versus undead nations is the fact that you have banishment. So let's talk a little bit about the banishment you get. Stellar Decree, right, which is your banishment. It's 30 range, but it scales. Its area of effect 8, which is enormous, but it scales. Its damage is only 2, but that scales. It's armor negating, but MR negates. But as part of your bless, you have Arcane Finesse, which will give you armor piercing. MR piercing. And then only affects undead beings, and then it can hold. So why is this so good? Okay, it's good because your holy level will scale as you enter a communion. So let's say you have 8 Star Children in the back, and then 8 of these priests in the front, right? That would be, I would say that would be a classic mid-game, turn 30, Rlyeh versus Airmore army, right? And if you have that, now you can start with 4 and 4, but for this example, we're going to use the 8 and 8, because I think that's where you want to get to. This guy, he's holy 2. When they are a communion leader, his path is going to be raised by the number of communion slaves you have, like whatever power of 2 that is. So if you have 2 communion slaves, you get 1 magic path boost. If you have 4, you get 2, and if you have 8, you get 3. So he's going to get a 3 magic path boost to all his paths, including holy. So he's going to be holy 5. So you're going to be doing a holy 5 banishment. Now what is that going to mean? It's going to mean you're getting an additional 4. Every time you see a plus, you're going to be getting like 4 times, like a 4 on top of this. So it's not going to be 34 for this. It's each plus gives you 5. So you're going to be getting range 50 banishment, which is really far. Your area of effect here is going to be 8 plus 4, which is going to be 12. Very big. Your damage, which is kind of a crappy 2, is going to be kicked up by 4. So it's going to be 6 now. And that's enough to kill most undead beings. Like, most of his undead stuff will die in 1 hit now. With an area of effect 12 thing, which is huge. You have MR negate, or you have the Arcane Finesse in your Bless, so that's going to help pass the check. If for whatever reason you don't kill them, but you've done some damage, like let's say I don't know, whatever reason you're hitting like one of the higher HP dudes like a Lictor, or they have Undying, right, because his Sacreds won't necessarily get hit. A lot of them are going to get stunned, but you have 8 guys casting that, right? The number of squares that you're going to be hitting with Stellar Decree is going to be 8 times 12. Somebody can do the math, but it's a big number, right? Okay, I did the math. It's 96 fools. Yeah, so it's a ton of damage, right? Like 96 squares you can kill, and you're going to be hitting it at range 50. Like let me put this in some context. You can potentially kill, and there can be 3 undead per square, right? Because they're size 2. I mean, you could potentially, like if they were all densely packed, you could potentially kill 300 undead per casting. Now, I mean, they're not all going to hit, but I'm just framing it. Like, if it's a huge blob, that's about how many you would kill. I mean, because some of them are going to fail or pass the MR check, and it's not going to damage them. So it wouldn't be a full 300, but like probably more than half would fail the MR check, I would have to guess. Because I think they're like 10 MR, and I think the MR check is 12. And then you've got Arcane Finesse, which is going to make it it's going to make their effective MR 9. So yeah, probably like 2/3 of them are going to get killed. So you could potentially, if they were densely packed, be killing 100, like 200 plus undead per casting, right? And with this communion, with personal regen or earth power, it can go on for a long time. Like with this, if you have a front line that can hold up for a little while, you could kill like a 2,000 undead stack. All right, so that's big. This is your weapon against Airmore. I mean, it is just punishingly strong, right? Punishingly strong. In my Airmore game where I was fighting a Rlyeh, the only real counter I had was when he did that. I had Blood Vengeance in my Bless, and I had enough Sacreds where I would kind of kill his guys as he would do it. So, I mean, that's a kind of counter, but it's, it still hurts. I wasn't really looking to have my Sacreds get pounded by Banishment. But it was a mix of that, and then I also had, like, Regeneration, so I would heal, and then a fair amount of HP bonus, so that, anyway. But also, this, I think the default banishment is not as strong as this if you're part of a turbo communion. So this is really, really good. So that is definitely how you're going to win the war against Airmore. And with it, you should be able to solidly win. So what would a good early game army look like? I mean, ideally, you've got good skills. You can get a line of Meteorite Guard led by this guy, right? And you put those on the front line. Behind them, let's pretend these are Lobo Guard. You can put them in 4 little blocks. Everybody here is holding attack, right? You have your slaves, right, which I would put, you have 8. So I would do like, this is our cap. So we'll just kind of draw out what the slaves could look like. I would put the slaves usually right here, which are going to collect a flank like this. Because we can potentially buff up our slaves with Iron Skin. They can do Body Ethereal before they become a slave 2, which is going to make them very durable. And then we'll put 2 in the front, right? And so these are our 8 slaves. They're in a nice little box. And as they take all the buffs from the other dudes, you can put things like Luck on them. You can put things like Astral Shield. I'm not sure if that... I don't know if that works on Undead at all. I don't think it does, but you can do the Iron Skin, you can do Personal Regeneration. They can be very, very tough. And they can form ideally nothing gets through, but if it does, and then you have 8 mages here in the middle, which are maybe all up here like this. Okay, pretend this was it. This is your 8 and 8. This would be a very effective communion. You've got your Meteorite Guard in a line. Everybody's on hold and attack. You've got 4 boxes of Lobo Guard on hold and attack. And honestly, 80 is kind of overkill on the Meteorite Guard. I mean, great if you can make them. But yeah, so 80 of these, or maybe 60 of these, and then 100 to 200 Lobo Guard. I would say 200 Lobo Guard. This is just the city-taking machine. And these guys are really high morale. In fact, the Meteorite Guard can be a little bit of a liability, because as you march into enemy territory, if you're starving, you're going to be, first of all, this plus morale, you're going to lose a morale from being in an enemy dominion, and not in a home province, right? So you're going to go basically, this 12 is going to jump down to... basically to, I think the enemy dominion will give a -1, but you get the 1 from the morale bonus, so it's only going to be 12. But if you're starving, it's going to be bad. So if you bring the Lobo or the Meteorite Guard, you really want to make sure you have the food items, which you can't really forge yet. So you really need somebody to forge those for you. That's if you're going to bring the Meteorite Guard. If you can't, and I wouldn't bring the Meteorite Guard unless you can get the food items. If you can't, you do not need them, right? You just bring the Lobo Guard. The Lobo Guard do not necessarily care that much about food. And that is because they have really, really good morale, because they're mindless, right? So you just have them out there. Their job is... A Lobo Guard is basically as good as what you put behind them. They're not going to kill anything, but they have a lot of HP. And they'll die kind of slowly if there's a huge banishment spam communion coming out behind them. So... the Meteorite Guard are great. It is a great part of this build, but especially invading into barren Airmorian land, unless you have the food items, which you can trade for, and you should. I wouldn't use them, because the morale can actually kind of bite you more than it's going to help having a better quality front line. Now you can, and it will depend. In a pitched fight, though, if these guys are starving, they're going to run pretty fast. But it may lower your attrition a little bit if it's an easy fight. But if it's an easy fight, you don't really need them. You're not going to have much attrition anyway. So that would kind of be my first objective. If you had to prioritize objectives and you have limited amount of resources, the first objective is get an 8 and 8 communion, or really it's get a 4 and 6 communion, right? Because you get 4 slaves in the back, 6 mages in the front. That one will eventually fatigue out. And by the way, I don't consider these 2 guys, if they were to be in it, I would give them bows, crossbows, so they would shoot afterwards. and that way they won't cast things off path and that are expensive and fatigue and really kind of kill the communion. But because of that, I wouldn't really count them in the 2. So like you could have 4 slaves. You have these 2 guys. They are going to do their initial buffs. And then they're going to go... You can have them do some of the astral things, because astral isn't off-path. But by the time they go off-script, you need to script them to fire, so they don't cast a bunch of things. But you can use the astral on-path stuff for these guys to do, like, some of your evocation things, like solar rays and starfires. But when they go off-script, make sure they have a crossbow or something so they can do fire. And that will really help your communion not fatigue out. You can also just go 4-4 with these 2 guys on the side, and while your communion's small, you don't even really need them. But by the time you're 8 and 8, like these guys would be an additional 2 communion masters that don't really count to the 8, because they're not going to do too much to fatigue your communion out. Because they're going to ultimately, in a long battle, they're going to script go to firing. But right now, before Airmore has that much stuff, like he has a few 300-person armies, it can get way worse. And before it gets worse, smaller communions will be okay. But I would get like a 4-4, and I would quickly try to upgrade it to an 8-8, right? And with at least 200 chaff in front of it. And then just start knocking down these forts. And potentially, I think once you have an 8-8, you go straight for some of the harder objectives and potentially like go after Airmore itself. It's going to be very, very hard for him to counter you without research. Like, very hard. Right? And if you know you're going to be fighting a lot of sacreds, then make sure you bring even more chaff. And if you're in enemy dominion and you're starving, do not bring Meteorite Guard. So that, I think, is like objective number 1, is get an army that can knock down forts. And what that will mean is starting to recruit Star Children, because you don't have any. Right? You have enough of your... you have enough of your other mages you can kind of manage. And it also means getting some of your priest mages here. So what I would do to kind of cut cost here is I would get rid of you have enough Illithids. And the thing is, they're kind of good, but they're not going to be awesome here, and especially until you can get this bug fixed. But yeah, you can take the Illithids, you can put them in this big Doom stack too, that's fine. Just know they eat food. And if you're combining them with Meteorite Guard, you could be inadvertently kind of causing your Meteorite Guard to starve. But so in the short run, combine all your Illithids, right? Have a Doom stack that can roll around and take forts, and potentially kill his stuff. Figure out whether this Holden Fire matters, whether it's at closest or random, because right now you're targeting mindless stuff and it's doing nothing. It's not your fault. I think it's a game bug, but yeah, so that would be kind of like my first advice. Consolidate these, right? Immediately, as fast as you can, get to 4 Star Child and 4 of your priest mages, and get them into an Astral Communion. And then as quickly as you can after that, get up to an 8 and 8. Once you have an 8 and 8, I think you can take Airmore's capital. And I know you were like worried about this war, but this is a war you should dominate. Like, you should straight up dominate. With that, let's talk about, and I just want to say after that, second priority is going to be getting your Dominion out, right? So if there's like a gold scarcity issue, first say, what are the things I need gold for to get that army I just described? And get that immediately. Next thing is, after you have that, your next priority is getting the infrastructure out to get your Dominion. Because that Dominion is going to give you money. And you really are going to need it. You're going to need the preachers I talked about. You're going to need the temples. And then you're going to need the, like, where there's low Dominion, you probably want to go ahead and get like a few, like have a small little army of H1 preachers. You know, like probably 6 or 7 of them spread out around the map. And they're just going to be working on like where you have 1 enemy candle and getting it up to like 2 of your own candle. And once they're at 2 of your own candle, you can move them somewhere else. Or just have them sit there and make sure it never goes below 2. But they're pretty low upkeep, and that's definitely something you should do. And then having the Holy Twos in your forts, kind of try to keep your Dominion up around 5. So that is, I would say, the second priority in terms of cash. Okay, so those are the 2 big things. If you do that, you'll be in such a better, like a much better position in this game. Now, let's talk a little bit about research, and then I think we're going to end talking about diplomacy. So in terms of research, Okay, you're at Conjuration 5, which is really good. That probably allowed you to win this war against Atlantis. You've got water elementals, which you probably got, and that probably helped you win some of these important fights, so that's really good. It also, as an underwater nation, gives you Voice of Tiamat, which allows you to site search all of the elemental paths for only 1 mage turn and only 8 water gems. Which is cheaper, by the way, than if you were to do all the remotes individually. And it uses water gems, which, they're not like the most valuable gem. So it's going to get you into a bunch of paths which you may not have. It's very mage turn efficient, and it's pretty gem efficient compared to, well, I clicked on the wrong thing, to the other remotes. So this is a great spell. You want to spam it out. The problem is you don't really have a lot of water gems. One of the things you can do is turn your pearls into water gems. I wouldn't normally recommend it, but right now your water income is just it's not great, it's 10. So you can only cast it 1 per turn. If you, maybe you just, like, for starters, you definitely want to alchemize at least 1 pearl so you can cast it twice this turn. Like, you need to be casting it as much as you can. And ideally, like, if it were me playing, I would probably alchemize, like, turn half of my pearls into water gems as I need them. I wouldn't do them all at once, but as I need it, so that I can do at least 2 Voice of Tiamats a turn. And it may be, because you can actually, you might be better off just doing it a little bit all at once. So I kind of lied there. So if you do it all at once, you can just kind of do a big mass casting, and you'll find a bunch of stuff. And I just did this in a game I'm in. And, my gem income went up by, I think I cast it like 10 times, and my gem income went up by 11. So not in water or anything, but just spread out across. So it was worth it. It's like an 8-turn payback. And it's very mage turn efficient. So that's definitely something I would look to do, is kind of, it's a little bit longer payback if you're doing the alchemizing. It's like 16. But I think it's probably worth it, though it's up to you. It's up to you. But on the margin, if it, like, especially if you're like 1 gem away from being able to cast it that turn, like you are here from casting it twice, or you were, probably going to be worth it to alchemize. But again, it's a call. Okay, but research. So you got Conjuration 5, Alteration 1, Evocation 2. Evocation 2 is a good pickup. Construction 2, not sure what you went this for, but I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm not sure. Thaumaturgy, so you're going up to 5 and then you're hitting Evocation 6. So this is the recipe for Mind Hunt. For Mind Hunt to work, you need Soul Slay, really. And then in addition to Soul Slay, you need the Mind Hunt spell. The thing is, so that will be a good counter raiding tool for Airmore. Like, Airmore attacks you can pick off his commanders and kill his armies. It's not bad, but, Mind Hunt's kind of expensive. It's not a cheap spell. It takes you have a lot of pearls, but it takes kind of a lot of 2 pearls. It uses a cap-only mage. The other thing is Airmore has a built-in counter. They have stealthy astral mages that they can move around with their big armies. And I didn't know that when I first played Airmore, and there's a good chance this Airmore doesn't know it. But if he figures it out, then all of a sudden your entire very expensive early game research is gonna not pay off. And all the stuff in Evocation, none of it's gonna be better than Banishment for fighting Airmore. So Soul Slay's kind of nice, but it's not that good. There's not anything you desperately need Soul Slay for. It'll be kind of good against lictors and things like that. But they have an MR Bless. I don't think it's much better than Banishment, honestly. Unless they're sending only lictors at you, and you just have to kill them, and that Banishment is not cutting it. But honestly, the Banishment will probably cut it. So I think the research is pretty big mistake. I know what you can do with construction too. So let's talk about, what is the problem we're trying to address by going for Mind Hunt? The problem is, okay, we can get raided by Airmore. He's got lots of disposable troops and commanders. We want to kill him rather than have to guess where he's going to move every turn. Okay, that's a legitimate problem to try to fix. The easy way to fix it, again, is one of the best units in the game. It is the Star Child. So this guy, a rather unassuming Star Child, if we throw onto him just some things we can make already. We throw onto him a Hand of Acorns, which gives us 3 Vine Men, and we throw onto him a Skull Talisman, or later, you can get the other thing that allows you to reanimate one undead a turn. I think Amulet of the Dead. But you have to get Construction 4. If you get that, these guys are going to be pretty fierce in combat. I mean, in assassinations. You just script them, honestly, to just do Starfires times 5, and they're going to kill a lot of stuff. You can do other things like trying to buff them up, but you don't have any of the alteration stuff. That's fine. Just do Starfires times 5, and that will be pretty damn effective. So if you put those in some of the provinces you're worried about, that would be a good way to deal with raiding. I do not know how the scripting works for how this issue works with the Mind Blasters. If it works like it's supposed to, where it only targets mindless units, Airmore has a really hard time raiding underwater, and that's because his units which have mines cannot go underwater. His knights can go underwater, his undead can go underwater, except his ghouls can't, and his lictors can't. So all his units with mines cannot go underwater, which means you can just Mind Blast the commanders and then the army will dissolve. The problem is that this one guy is a little unreliable at it. So one thing you can do, because you have a lot of Illithids, is kind of just put a few of them on this guy, and you can just walk him through your little border provinces and poop out like 1 or 2 additional Illithids who will just join in the PD and will help Mind Blast whatever commanders he brings in. And it's a pretty small investment, but if you're having underwater raiding, it's a pretty good way to prevent him from coming and attacking you, assuming that the Mind Blast kind of works how it's supposed to work, where it doesn't target mindless. Obviously, if it doesn't work, you can kind of skip that, but that's a good way to prevent the underwater raiding. And then if you look at it, you really only have a few land provinces you would need to defend. So having, honestly, 3 assassins out will do a huge amount of work, and it's going to make it very, very expensive for Airmore to raid, while you move your big army around. The other thing to think about as you kind of set up these little counters is you can have a small little army that is designed to just kill whatever gets stranded as Airmore, because Airmore will raid, you'll kill the commander, the army will be stranded, and so then maybe just having a tiny little communion that's going to come through and blast him with maybe like a small little Lobo Guard screen. Like that's okay, or maybe with like some Illithids and they can blast, the PD to death, and once the PD runs, then they'll probably kill any undead commander that moved in to pick the troops up, and then the undead will dissolve. So maybe like a small group of Illithids, a small communion, and some Lobo Guard, like a 2-and-2 communion maybe, or just maybe you skip the communion part and you just do. Well, it's probably better to still do the communion and do 2 of these guys or 3 of these guys. I don't know. But a small little group to clean up the armies that get picked off behind from the assassins. And just having one of those. So that will help deal with all the raiding without having to spend all this research on evocation and thaumaturgy. Now later, those are definitely good targets to get, but right now you have more important things to get. And with that, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we should get instead. Well, the thing is, in Alteration, there are a lot of goodies for you. You've got Mass Protection, up at Alt 7, and I know that seems like a long way away, but as you get there, you can potentially do Wooden Warriors, which will add a lot of life to your communion. You can get Battle Fortune, which can be pretty good, cast on little Lobo chunks, makes them much more resistant to dying, and it's something you can do like Clams of Pearls. You can spam it out twice as a leader of a communion, so like 2 guys with Clams of Pearls can get a lot of luck out. So that's kind of nice to do. For death, we get some really good stuff. We get Skeletal Legion, which is going to be really good for you. A lot of the Airmorian troops have pierce damage, and this will cut that damage in half. So it's going to do a lot to bulk up your front line. Darkness will be really good against your next target. It's not going to help versus Airmore, but versus other nations, it's really, really good for Rlyeh. And then Earth, I don't know if there's anything here too noteworthy. Up to 7. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything. Fog Warriors, you're not really going to have easy access to. Oh. Okay, we don't really need anti-magic. Fell Vapors isn't good. I know there's one thing I'm looking at. Was it up here in Alteration? Creeping Doom. That's not what I was thinking of. Was it Thaumaturgy? Oh yeah, the Ravenous Swarm is what I was looking for. So Thaumm 5, it may be worth finishing Thaumm 5 just to have Soul Slay in your pocket, but it also gives you the Ravenous Swarm, which is super good against Airmore, really good against their elites. It's only 1 gem to cast, so if you're part of it, if you've got the 8 Communion Slaves, it'll get your Nature 1s up to Nature 4, and they can then drop this. So yeah, that's definitely nice to have in the pocket. It will kind of give a lot of fatigue to your Communion, so it's important you combine this with personal regen and then Earth Power, so that your Communion is a little less stressed. And if you're doing like the more buffs you put on, usually you need to be careful about how many Masters you put on, because your Communion will burn a good bit hotter. But the Ravenous Swarm is definitely good to add. And honestly, you make like a cornucopia, or you have someone make you a cornucopia, and you just put, like, that guy can do it every single fight, and it's going to make a big deal, or a big difference. Okay, so basically, what are the targets? Finishing Thaumm 5 is fine. Yeah, I'd probably do that, because that goes ahead and adds the Ravenous Swarm to your agenda, but I wouldn't go for Evocation. I would start going immediately up Alteration. You got all the goodies we talked about, Mass Protection being a pretty big target, and then being able to spam out Battle Fortune is really nice, and Skeletal Legion is really good in Darkness versus other people. Those are some of the main ones. I probably left something out, but that will basically give you a much longer, or your front line will hold up much longer. And even when you're fighting another nation, having a front line hold up longer, you can just add more to the Communion, and the fact you have Soul Slay, like, you'll Soul Slay your way through most of what they have eventually. So, yeah, I think that works. What else? We've talked about research. We need to talk about site searching a little bit. So this site searching is not great. Now, you've been at war, you've been doing other things. There's so many things you've done right just by the fact you're so big. Can't be expected to site search everything, but your site searching isn't great. You've got Voice of Tiamat out, it looks like 6 times, which is okay, but it's not great. Ideally, you would have kind of gotten it out more, but I guess you probably had other things for those water gems to do. You've site searched water and a little bit of astral, but you need to do way more. The thing I would do, you need to get Voice of Tiamat everywhere. You need to site search nature everywhere, and you need to site search death and astral high as many places as you can. So Astral 4 is worth searching because there's a site that's pretty common called Unfound Door. So it's good to do that if you can, and here it's a pretty easy option for you. And you need to site search death. So I'd get this guy, by the way, you don't want to die, so script him to retreat in case there's like a random battle. You do not want him showing up in the battle and dying. It's a 1 in 16 chance of getting these guys, and they're super important for you. So don't let him die, but anyway, you do want him out site searching. So send this guy out to site search. He'll site search death 2. You can do these guys death 1. You can potentially have this guy just do dark knowledge with whatever death gems you have come in. Though you may want to use those death gems for like a skull talisman at the beginning with the hammer. Okay, so site searching, we need to get at least 3 of your nature mages out site searching, and you want, because the thing is with nature, you can find forts, and finding a fort early in the game or even in the middle of the game is really nice. And it's also just going to get your nature income off the ground. And it's going to be, nature income's pretty important for Rlyeh. So 3 or 4 nature mages, get them out site searching. You've already hit a lot of your main research targets. Getting Thaumaturgy is not going to be game-changing. Getting Alt 7 isn't going to be completely game-changing. It's going to be really nice. But it's okay if you slow. You've got Conjuration 5. You've got a lot of the key research targets you need right now. So go ahead and get those mages out site searching, especially these Death Astral ones. Start site searching things up to Astral 4. And get your nature mages out site searching everywhere too. So I think that is, and like that you need to get on like pronto too. And this is a thing, it's not going to give, like there's not many trade-offs here. The only trade-off is research, and you've hit most of the research you need. So this isn't going to really compete with new resources because you're not going to have to recruit other things. These are like how to use existing mages you have. So unless they're going to be needed for that army, which you can just scrounge up, like this is your nature mage and here's your earth mage, right? And so you only need 2 of them to go with your big army. So you've already got them. Other people, these mages can go run around and go in different directions and site search nature. And then you can probably send 2 or 3 of these guys. Probably send 2, so you have 1 death mage back at home that can forge things or cast dark knowledge. and these guys can just run around and site search. So that'll get your death income going, because right now it's only 1. But once you get up to like 4 or 5, you can start spamming out Dark Knowledge, and it'll grow even more. But death is an extremely, extremely important path for Rlyeh, so you can't ignore it. You need to get on it like pronto. Okay, so now I think we've talked about a lot of the things. We've talked about assassinating to deal with raiding. We've talked about how to build your army versus Airmore. We've talked about research targets. We've talked about a lot of stuff. And we've talked about spreading your dominion. Let's now talk about how you can win, right? So one of the things you have to be careful about fighting Airmore is you don't want to be doing too much of the heavy lifting in the coalition. Like, so Kalen might join and might do some, help out. But you have to, this land isn't going to give you too much. So I would probably just try to, nobody, Nazca, who's down here, apparently is not helping much versus Airmore. They appear to be at peace. So I would tell Nazca, I'm not going to do a ton of the fighting. And maybe that will tempt Nazca into going to war against Airmore. Say, I'm going to pursue a non-aggression pact with Airmore. And you're not really opposed to a non-aggression pact. Airmore is kind of scary and they need to be dealt with. The only reason you would want a non-aggression pact them is you're worried about them. And I think, honestly, you can eat them. But it's something to consider. If, for example, you have going through and conquering all their lands is probably not smart. Because, what are you going to get from it? Not much. But you could go ahead and take their capital and leave one stack here with some food items that are just going to defend, and you've got assassins elsewhere. And he can't really come back and mess with you, and then you can just let other people eat him. That's probably what I would do. But honestly, you should be able to take his capital within a year, right? In 4 turns, you should have the 4-4 army. In 7 turns, you should have the 8-8. And then by the time you have the 8-8, you need to shortly be on top of his capital and capping him or taking a few things. So a year and a half, you should have him. Now, once you have Airmore, I think you don't probably want to go just gung-ho eating all this stuff. I've kind of done that in a game where I kind of completely killed the pop kill. Probably better to share the love with other people, because you end up getting a lot of land you can't really defend. You can't even put PD there. It's really sad. But this would be kind of a nice cordon. The nice thing about getting his capital too is it's going to give you a crap ton of death gems, which is going to be really good for you because, like I said, Rlyeh loves death gems. So then, okay, how do you win? So let's say you've accomplished this versus Airmore. What do you do next? Well, the thing that you have to realize, so you've said that Fascia has been a good ally, and y'all have had a good relationship. The thing is, it's more good for them than it is for you, at least going forward. Because it's messing up you went scales and you don't have dominion in your provinces, and a lot of this is from Fascia messing all your stuff up. So, honestly, I think you should just eat Fascia. You should roll a big army onto their capital and then kill them. There's almost nothing they're going to have that can stand up to 400 Loboguard, because now we're fast forwarding a year and a half when you're getting ready for this, 2 years, right? You're going to have 400 Loboguard mass protection, a big Soul Slay Communion. You're going to have, Battle Fortune coming out. You're going to be having, Skeletal Legion. If you notice, most of these guys have spears. So, you're going to be having Skeletal Legion. They have archers too, I think, so you don't really care about those. Potentially they're going to have Thunderstrike spam, which is something you have to deal with, but honestly, Battle Fortune with a bunch of Loboguard is going to do a pretty good job against that. And Soul Slay is kind of going to wreck their... If you have enough Soul Slay, it's going to kind of wreck their backlines. It's something you can lose, but honestly, you can just kind of eat him. And if you sit here, you can attack his capital or this fort, and he doesn't know which one, right? So then you attack this, and then he doesn't have the benefit of having PD. He has to sail a big army into you. You take it, you move on to the next. I think you would probably win a Fascia fight. I don't know how big he is, but I think you kind of... A lot of times, a lot of diplomacy, in my opinion, is actually dictated by the map. Obviously, to some extent, you can't be really at war with somebody that's not near you. But this guy, his nation's just so up in your business. You really need to get it out just to have contiguous dominion. It's going to really make you the owner of the lake. It's going to also set you up, right now Shinuyama's kind of losing against Airmore. it's going to set you up to potentially pick off some of Shinuyama if Airmore does end up beating him. Yeah. So I think these guys you would probably want to consider for your first target. Like real nation target after Airmore. That would probably be my advice. You could also go after one of the elves. The thing is, you have like a very narrow expansion, like front to go in and attack. You don't know where the elves are. They're all invisible. I'd probably not want to do that. It's not something you can't do, but it's something I'd be like, eh. And I think before you fight the elves, you really want to have assassins online. I don't really know if you're going to need assassins to kill Fascia. But that's another major target. Hitting Construction 6 gives you Bottle of Water Assassins instead of these Acorn Assassins. Bottle of Water Assassins are way, way better. Because not many things can 1v1 a Bottle of Water, a Water Elemental. Especially if you're in Heat Dominion, or like basically if it's a Water Elemental, not an Ice Elemental. So anyway, you probably want to kind of have that timing for fighting these guys. Ideally, this timing, you've hit a lot of your alteration stuff before you fight Fascia. But before you fight the elves, you probably want to have a good assassin network out. And honestly, these Star Children with Bottles of Water, I think, are one of the most like annoying game mechanics ever. So I think that is about it. This is your next target. It's hard to say what to do much farther after that. That's like 2 years in the future in terms of like game time. So I'm not totally sure what I would recommend, but I think this is a pretty good start. I think you have a chance at winning the game. I think the big risks to you not winning the game are other people winning before you're ready, which I know is kind of dumb, but it can happen. So like Nazca, I think is pretty big from the reports you said. Airmore is kind of big, but I think if you take Airmore's capital, I'm not as worried about them. And then I'm not sure who else you said is big. The other thing is, you have an Ulm in this game who I think is small and open for business for trading. So potentially getting lanterns early could really help you with your research because you're kind of a ways away from Construction 6. So I would look to trade that. The more times you cast Voice of Tiamat, the more fire gems you'll get, which potentially you can convert into lanterns. It's really your only way to get fire site searched. So that's something you can do. The other thing is you can trade with Ulm for hammers. I think Ulm also borders, from what you said, Airmore. So he'd probably be very happy to trade you things like hammers. And that will help you make the assassin gear pretty cheaply. I can't remember. I think I was trying to think back to the other episode if there's anything in particular you should make for your communions. I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I think that is about it for advice for this. But anyway, I think you have a great solid start. I think you're in a good position to potentially win the game if nobody just runs away with it. So kind of manage that diplomacy. I think you have a good shot at taking Airmore and taking his cap and getting all of that death income. And then after you do that, I think you find some, like you're going to have a hard time piecing Airmore, but you do need to cap him. If you cap him too, were there any, I think he did have quickness. So you get rid of a lot of the hard parts of his bless. It's going to be really hard for him to fight you without his god, assuming it's unimmobile, which I don't know, normally is with Airmore. Like it's probably a demi-lich. So, you kill it. Airmore's gone, or their bless is gone. They're not going to be nearly as scary. I think I would tell them that they can, like, screw off. If they want to go fight other people, or if other people are going to fight them, fine, but you're not going to push in anymore, and then you just keep one army here to kind of hold the line. Maybe even come down this way, but potentially you can get Nazca in on it. Containing Airmore would be nice so long as he doesn't threaten to take your stuff from you. I don't know if there's anything else. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, so anyway, I think we're going to close. I'm going to talk a little bit about if you want this. So again, how it's working now, and I don't know how it will keep working. Like this one I did for free or whatever, just So if you're a Patreon subscriber and I feel like doing it, occasionally I'll do this where I'm just like, hey, anybody that wants to submit their turn, and I may do it. Um, or if you're a top tier Patreon, you can request me to do any video, and I can like do a nation analysis or whatever you'd like. But I can also do this, which is like a Dominions intervention. And yeah, you can just do it for a month or however long. So it's not like you have to sign up and stay there. Um, but yeah. Anyway, what I'm also interested to know from you is if you like this kind of content, if you thought it was fun, or if you would rather me just stick back to playing my own multiplayer games. So anyway, let me know what you think, and appreciate it.